Okay, welcome back. So, I wanted to give you a little bit more background information on some of my experiences in South Korea before I started my PhD. I did some of this research when I had just finished my bachelor's degree and I had moved to South Korea. I wasn't really sure what to do with myself, if I wanted to go to graduate school or not, but I had read this previous book that I was talking about by Laura Kendall, Getting Married in South Korea, and I became really interested in Korean dating. But not only because I read that book, I was also dating a South Korean woman. We dated for about almost 2 years. We were talking about getting married at one point, but she didn't want to move to the United States, and I really wanted to go to graduate school. So we ended up breaking up really amicably. Everything was fine. But I want to tell this little story about our first Peppero Day. So by now you should know what Peppero Day is. I've talked about the holiday and how you exchange these long, thin cookies. This is what it looks like. And on November 11th, because that's 11/11, which looks like, four Peppero cookies together. I don't know why. On 2010, I put this box of Peppero cookies behind my back. I did this research. I was like, oh, I'm going to give my Korean girlfriend Peppero. I'm so smart. I'm such a good anthropologist because I'm doing this research and doing the right thing. I surprised her with it. I said, "Oh, here you go." We went out to dinner. I said, "Here you go. Here's the Peppero I got you." And she said, "Is this all you got me?" And I was really shocked. And it wasn't until that moment that I had not realized the extent to which the maintenance of our relationship relied on the exchange of commodities. Because I'll move my head out of the way. This is what she had gotten me. She had gotten me this big, huge gift basket that she was hiding behind her chair. She gave it to me. And it's got teddy bears and romantic comedy DVDs and like a mug that says "I love you" and flowers and like 20 boxes of these stupid Peppero cookies. There were a lot in there. And they're about $35-$40 at the local CVS or 7-Eleven type place. So yeah, she sort of outspent me, and I guess that's really bad for men to do in general because men are supposed to make a lot more money than women in South Korea. But also, the $1 comes to be seen as like the amount that I loved my girlfriend, and I like you $1 amount, not the form of the gesture. Like, look, I did research and I found out what I was supposed to exchange. Here you go. But it's like, oh, you only like me $1 and I like you $35-$40. This is a problem, right? So it made me really want to study the connection between economics and courtship. Let me get this to change. I keep looking at myself in the circle and seeing that my hair's messed up. Sorry. So this is what Peppero Day looks like in South Korea. It's a big thing. About a month leading up to Peppero Day on November 11th, you see just tons of these displays set up everywhere at the grocery store, outside of convenience stores like this, and they're just everywhere. So it's a very, very visible holiday. And there's big wide range of the amount of stuff you can buy. Like I said, you can just get one box of Peppero. They have these gigantic boxes of Peppero that have these like Peppero cookies that are this big. And it's very visible throughout Korea. So I just wanted to show you some images. Oops, go back. There we go. Now, it leads me to talk about the various kinds of dating that there are in South Korea. Peppero and the number of dating holidays was something that was really interesting me at first, but it turns out that women are very aware that they can accidentally be caught up in these situations where the man has a lot more control, has a lot more power in the relationship because of their increased economic power. So I was asking women, if the man is paying for most or all of these dates, and you're sort of forced to constantly be exchanging gifts and celebrating all this stuff, how do you repay? And they said most guys are pretty good, but some men abuse this increased power within the relationship. They ask for sexual services, sexual favors. They say, "Oh, I paid for all this, and it's Peppero Day. We went on a romantic date, and now you owe me this and that." And they call it skinship. I'm doing air quotes, skinship, which is a Korean English word put together that means sort of sexual touching, and they'll be very pushy sometimes. So women are aware of this, and they aware of this sort of inability of themselves to be able to make enough money to combat this within the relationship, to come into the intimate relationship on equal footing. And so they deploy different kinds of dating in order to screen against these kinds of men. It turned out that a lot of people, men and women, really wanted to meet naturally. This is this top type of meeting, which is developing a relationship through work, school, or interest groups like A lot of Americans would, but this wasn't the most common or popular type of dating. People said it would be nice, but generally they employed sogating, which is an introduction dating, a blind date arranged by a friend. And a lot of people told me, especially women told me, the good thing about this was that it would restrain the man from being pushy and asking for sexual favors in exchange for their greater economic input to the dating and marriage process. So by having a mutual friend that had set you up, by having this other person, if the man got really pushy, there would be social ramifications for that man. The woman might complain to their mutual friend, like, hey, this guy you set me up with, he paid for dinner, which was really nice, but then he wanted to go to a hotel or something like that. And then all of his friends would find out about it through gossip, and it would be very bad for him. So it's a way to socially restrain men by meeting somebody with a common interest to restrain them from taking advantage of this greater financial capital that they have, leveling the playing field. Now, there's other types of dating too. There's hunting. It's literally the Korean word for it is called hunting, where men go to bars with groups of men and try to go get phone numbers from random people. Women hate it. They really don't like unencumbered men that are from outside of their social circle. They find it very dangerous, and South Korea does have a very high rate of domestic violence, although it's not a violent country. You can walk around at night alone, and it's much safer than the United States in that way. But domestic abuse is rather high, unfortunately. So people don't really like hunting. But there's dating applications. There are group blind dates, which are sort of a group of 6 or 8 people might have some common friends and interests, and they go on this kind of group blind drinking date, which is really, really common in college. There's an example of that in the bottom left, which is from a reality TV show. Professional matchmaking agencies, parent introductions, which they still very much do, these sort of arranged dating done by parents. People are very not into them, but they do happen. I'm going to talk more about them. So let's talk about dating applications and dating matchmaking agencies, because even though South Korea is often called the most wired country in the world. They have some of the fastest, cheapest internet of any country in the world. 99.2% of Korean households have reliable, fast, inexpensive internet, much, much higher than the United States. Most Koreans shun dating applications for fear of meeting people outside their social circle. So I used to use Tinder all the time in South Korea. Even when I was there with my fiance, I would use Tinder to meet people in order to interview them for my research and ask them why they're using Tinder. But Koreans really generally don't like it because they're afraid of meeting somebody outside their social circle. Women are afraid that the men will take advantage of them, and women or the men are afraid that women will accuse them of sexual impropriety and that they might sue them, which doesn't seem like it's very common, but it was a fear that some men expressed. So generally, South Korean people were afraid of meeting strangers. They wanted to meet people within their social network rather than outside. So they turned to these sort of online technologies, these matchmaking agencies that are done online. And the matchmaking agencies would serve the role of that third party friend. They would screen people and for violent crimes. If somebody complained about them that had been on a date with them previously, they would get kicked out of the matchmaking service and etc. So they would serve as a sort of third party friend, a sogating, but you pay for it. These are typically rather expensive services, which I'll get into. So I know you can't read Korean, or most of you probably can't read Korean, but this is a book jacket that I found in a South Korean bookshop. And the left one says, "If I study for 10 more minutes, my future wife's face will change." While the one on the right says, "If I study for 10 more minutes, my future husband's job will change." Now, in the context of what we've learned already, what do you think that means? What do you think that means? Well, my interpretation is, if I study for 10 more minutes, my future wife's face will change. Means if I study harder, I'll make more money and get into a better school, get a better job, and I'll get a more beautiful wife, is essentially what it's saying. If I study harder, I'll get a more beautiful wife. Whereas the bottom right one, or the one on the right says, if I study for 10 more minutes, my future husband's job will change, means that if I study harder, I might get into a good school, where it doesn't really matter what I study. Even women who go to sort of really high-end schools oftentimes don't go on to have elaborate, extensive careers. They just many of them go there in order to get married to other men who went to that school. So it means if I study harder, I'll get into a better school where I'll have a social network of higher income men. My job is the way I move up in the world as a woman in South Korea is through marriage, and the way I move up in the world as a man is through studying harder and marrying a beautiful wife, right? So again, some of these same themes from older kinds of marriage in South Korea have not changed that much. Now, this is a ranking system that was actually, oh, excuse me, go back. This is a ranking system that was actually sort of leaked onto the internet by one of these companies. You see these advertisements for Duo. Duo is one of the largest online marriage agencies, these matchmaking companies, and they charge very high fees, but it turns out that if you join one of these companies, men and women are ranked in the marketplace of dating for very different reasons. So women pay much higher fees to join than men. There are far more, like 3-to-1 ratio, much more women on these websites than there are men for some reason. And women pay higher fees, so they could pay sometimes $1,500 for 5 dates. That is 5 dates with 5 different men. Some packages cost as much as $10,000. Men with good specs, that is men that have high incomes, that have parents that have high incomes, that have things like that. You see that men get ranked very strongly on what their job is. Doctors and dentists give them an A rating. Educational obtainment give them higher rankings depending on the university they go. So you could be an A person, a B person, a C person, all the way down the list. Men with good specs who are ranked as A's or B's actually don't pay anything to join the marketplace, whereas highly educated or high-earning women actually move down the ladder. If you're higher educated, higher-earning woman, you actually cannot be an A or a B. That's not desirable by South Korean men. They prefer to outrank and out-earn and be more educated than their wives. So women with higher education actually pay more to join. Older women have to pay more than younger women. And so when you look at this ranking system, which you can look at it a little bit more in depth, men are ranked based on their achievements. What they did, what they're doing, their income, whereas women are ranked based on the parents' class background, the type of family they came from, right? Which is something that they don't necessarily have all that much control of. So again, a lot of these things are still mirroring older practices in South Korean dating, right? If you're a C person of a woman or a man and you want to date an A person, you can't unless you pay more, right? There's all these ways that the market interacts with dating and marriage that we are sometimes pretty uncomfortable with, and having this sort of in black and white makes us sort of uncomfortable, right? So I'm going to skip the next slide because I see this video is getting a little long. But to conclude, economic development in South Korea has increased individual agency in selecting their dating partners. People are no longer confined to the marriage partner that their parents choose for them, and that's great. That has opened up dating and marriage in South Korea quite a bit to love marriages and other kind of marriage. But the commodification of dating rituals has exacerbated existing economic barriers to courtship. So if you're low income or something like that, it really puts up a lot of barriers, especially for men, because of the emphasis that is placed on Korean men and their ability to earn income, really puts up a lot of barriers for South Korean people, subjecting individuals to the power of neoliberal market forces in the dating marketplace. So the negotiation of who pays the cost of dates is a layered and multifaceted space where existing inequalities between men and women in larger Korean society are reflected but also magnified and contested, revealing how economic inequality contributes to and results in intimate inequality. And we'll talk about this more later throughout the class.